Hi, my name's India Fisher. I played Charlie Pollard in the Big Finish Doctor Who series. You're listening to Mark Who 42.
Hello, this is Marku 42. This is Juan Sanmiguel. We're going to be running the show today. We're going to talk about Supergirl first, and I'm not alone. I have an esteemed guest.
Thank you for having me here. I'm Arturo Serrano. I'm a reviewer for the blog Nerds of a Feather, and I'm also part of the editorial team at the magazines Strange Horizons and Galactic Journey, and I am the author of the alternate history novel Two Climates Unknown.
And that's great. And when we come back, we'll be talking about Supergirl. So catch us when we come back.
Don't go away. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Mark Who 42 after this.
Get ready for the ultimate geek experience right here in the Sunshine State. Florida Geek Scene presents a full calendar of events and conventions. From anime to horror, we've got it all. Meet your favorite stars, find rare collectibles, and immerse yourself in your passion. Experience the thrill of cosplay and witness amazing live performances. Stay up to date with the latest news and reviews all across Florida. Florida Geek Scene, where pop culture happens. Visit us online for more. Don't miss out on the fun. Join us at Florida Geek Scene, floridageekscene.com.
You are listening to Mark Who 42's Universe.
And we're back. So we're going to be talking about Supergirl, which is what I'm trying to remember, DC's entry this year into, well, at least into the summers. I don't know. I don't know when they're going to release Clay's Face. I've already seen that poster. I've already seen that poster in the release. Uh, Arturo did a review of it. I've seen it. We've all got opinions. I'm in, but we're going to talk a little bit about the background of Supergirl. I mean, she came out, I believe, in 1960 or 59, around that portion. My first encounter with her was reading the Great Book of Superman, this giant encyclopedia book, which had everything listed, and it was done in the mid 70s. And it kind of explained to me the whole thing about Kara and, Argo City and where she came from. It didn't mention, I didn't realize later that I think for a couple of years she was living in an orphanage being Superman's secret weapon and then came back. And then Superman announced her to the world. I think she had an issue where she came out into society. And then, of course, the big thing in comics after that, we have the Silver Age, and then she's in the Bronze Age. Not much change there. She would get her own comic book on and off. But then in 1985, she was killed off in that very big, that classic issue of Crisis, which is hanging on my wall as part of the whole thing of Crisis on Infinite Earths, where she died in order to buy the hero's time in order to stop the Anti-Monitor. And then we go into the next stage where she was the Matrix. She was this artificial being. I forget if Luthor created her or some other agency. And that lasted until the 90s when Peter David got to take over for her and took that initial Matrix idea and combined it that she somehow merged with another human being named Linda Danvers. And that continued until they brought back Kara Zor-El and I believe the Batman Superman crossover. Now, Arturo, we were talking before the show, and you said you had more aware of Supergirl through the media. So why don't you talk about that and her encounters on the big screen and small screen?
My first introduction to the character was the 80s movie, which was part of the larger Superman movies franchise, but the Supergirl movie of the 80s is not very well written, not very well plotted. It is a cheap movie. Uh, it has a bit of that charm of movies that you know are making decisions that make little sense, but uh, once you take into account that it is a really, really cheap movie, that is the decision that makes sense so you can make the movie. In this case, uh, Supergirl is not fighting giant monsters or aliens or international conspiracies like Superman usually does. Supergirl is battling a witch because apparently it's a tradition that when you have a female hero, you have to give her a female enemy. And they fight for a techno-magical object that was lost from the city of Argo. And if she doesn't recover the magical object, the city of Argo will be destroyed. And the witch is using that magical object to seduce a guy. That is the size of the stakes.
Yeah, you summed it up pretty well. I mean, I, yeah, unfortunately, it was a confusing plot, and actually, they had worse. The original, I think originally they wanted to get Dolly Parton to play some type of cosmetic tycoon, which is one of the original ideas, and they either couldn't get it together or DC shut them down. So, yeah, that was an odd film, and it's interesting that you. I didn't think it's interesting that you mentioned it was cheap. I didn't realize. I'd have to look at it again. I didn't realize it was cheap. I just thought they made some odd decisions in it. The depiction of the Phantom Zone always confused me, and also it just looked odd. I mean, the thing is, I thought the flying effects and all that looked okay, but I that's an interesting thing. It didn't occur to me that it was basically cheap.
Well, now that you mention this idea of a cosmetics villain, that reminds me that they eventually did that for the Catwoman movie, 2004, I think.
Yeah, I
And
wonder.
it, it, it it goes again into this cliche of giving a female hero a female problem to solve, like a cosmetics executive who, in the Catwoman movie, is selling a dangerous poison cosmetic to get rich.
At least that's how I remember it. If anybody who hears this correct me if I'm wrong. At least that's how I remember. I know that Dolly Parton was in the running for getting that role, and they could for whatever reason they couldn't get her, and they got I forgot who the actress was who played it, but it was also a big name. I mean, that
Faye
was the other
Dunaway.
thing. It was Faye Dunaway. I wasn't sure if it was Faye Dunaway. I mean, the thing is, they got a bunch of big names. They got Peter O'Toole to play one of the Kryptonian scientists. I could be wrong. I also thought that she could have. They also got a big name for for Supergirl's parents, Zor-El and Allura. But the names aren't coming back to me now.
I don't even remember if her parents are in the movie.
I thought they were. At least I remembered. I thought they were. I thought it's like her parents and Peter O'Toole are like the main people, the main power brokers, or the main characters you see her talk to in Argo City.
But Faye Dunaway commits to the role. Uh, she understands the level of camp that the role requires.
And also, I just remembered something. I think, not necessarily preparation for this podcast. I think I just remembered the guy who directed it actually went on to direct a lot of episodes of Smallville. I follow Michael Rosenblum's podcasts on on YouTube, and he interviewed Helen Slater, who played Supergirl. He told him, "Oh yeah, no, your director came by and did a lot of episodes of Smallville. It was fun to have him around. Apparently, he was a director that they enjoyed."
That reminds me, Kara, I didn't watch all of the last seasons of Smallville, but I remember reading somewhere that Kara does appear
Yeah, Kara.
in
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Do you want to finish your thought or?
she does appear in Smallville. I don't know in how many episodes.
Yep. I forget how I think she appeared in a couple of seasons. And also Helen Slater did the thing. She also appeared in Smallville. I think she did play Allura. I think she played Allura for that. It was kind of an interesting hand-me-down, and she did an episode. and I'm blanking out on the actress uh who did it. She also appeared in the WB Supergirl Supergirl show, where she also forgot what character she played. Oh, Laura Vandervoort played Kara Zor-El, and she did a bunch of it. So she was pretty good. And as I said, she would do some type of carry-on role in the Supergirl show, which you also saw. What'd you think of that?
It was lovely. It was very cute. It was very earnest. Uh, it was one of the last gasps of queer inclusive television that we are going to get in Warner for the foreseeable future. It was very refreshing how queer inclusive the Supergirl show was. For example, it had the first transgender superhero in television, and it was I don't know if the word people use these days is queer normative. Like queerness was not even a problem in the setting of Supergirl. It was just a part of some characters' lives, except for one character's coming out arc. But after that, it was no longer an issue.
Yeah, I mean, I thought the show was very positive. I mean, I really liked it. I mean, I think I did see one or two people online made have complained, but I said, who cares? I mean, no, it was just a great, no, it was a fun show. I mean, and I liked it that it, had a very long, it had 6 seasons, which was a pretty good run. And actually, I don't, this was during the CW era. I don't think the first season was on CBS, which is kind of interesting. They decided to do a Supergirl show rather than a Superman show. And it's interesting. Sometimes I think some of the things, and we can talk about that later, that some things work better that you can develop if you have a good plan on developing over a long time on a TV series, which I think they did pretty well on that show. And explore some certain things. Where in a movie you got to do a big event. But I thought it was this kind of. I just thought, oh, okay, they're doing a Supergirl show, and they did, of course, have Super. I was afraid that they'd somehow do some really weird thing where they try to like take out Superman and have her more of her own thing, which would have been interesting. Actually, might have been interesting if they did it right. But I just kind of like it that they did have the tie with Superman, and that he was doing his own thing in Metropolis, and she was doing her own thing in National City. And I think it was the most positive of the shows at the time. Arrow could go very dark, and The Flash, I still kind of liked it, but a lot of people felt that the later seasons of The Flash were convoluted, particularly after they did their version of The Crisis.
Mm.
Any thoughts on that? Or I mean, in Supergirl, I think maintained an even plane throughout that. At least it did for
Well,
me.
I didn't watch the Flash show, but I did hear that it had a villain problem. That in every season they resorted to the same uh, speedster villain season after season. I don't know how they handled it eventually, but I remember in one of the early crossover episodes when the Flash visits Supergirl's world, uh, Supergirl's boss comments that the guy who is the Flash looks like too too wholesome, too inoffensive, almost suspiciously so.
I guess Barry, like, I think you've picked a great word. I think Barry Allen was a very earnest character, and he was, the Silver Age Flash was very popular. I mean, to the point that I mean, he was also killed off in the Crisis, but Jeff Johns, and supposedly Marv Wolfman said he had a way to bring him back, when he killed him off in Crisis, and Jeff Johns was determined to bring him back, and he did bring him back as Barry Allen. And I think it's and I think he's an earnest character, and maybe I don't know if that's what she's counting to. And unfortunately, that was one of the things they lost. They couldn't afford Callista Flockhart for every episode, which they could on the CBS show when they moved it to the CW. Aside from that, I didn't notice any loss of of production qualities in the show.
I remember when they were planning the second season, the explanation that I read was that the first season was filmed somewhere, and the second season was going to be filmed somewhere else. And Calista Flockhart didn't want to have to fly to another city every week to do her episodes.
That means it's probably Canada or Vancouver. I mean, Vancouver, for better or for worse, a lot of shows go to film there. Um, I think I keep in contact with somebody who lives there, and I think he one time mentioned that you do see a lot of celebrities walking around, or at least you know that there's a lot of productions going on in that area. That kind of makes sense.
To finish on the Supergirl show, it had a somewhat strange premise because Supergirl's adopted sister works with a secret government agency that investigates extraterrestrial threats, and it feels sort of strange, this relationship, this working relationship that develops between Supergirl and the government. Sometimes it gets dangerously close to propaganda, almost too cozy with the authorities, almost like the relationship between the Adam West Batman and the police. Sometimes they get too friendly like that. But the fact that we eventually learn that the guy running this department happens to be the Martian Manhunter makes the relationship more interesting because it ultimately means that the person in charge of investigating aliens on Earth is not a human. It could have been used more fruitfully to explore the idea of conflicts of interest if you employ an alien to investigate aliens. But it also allows for many moments of empathy. The Supergirl show had a strong run in the mid seasons where it talked about immigration and it talked about xenophobia. And especially there was this season with the villain Agent Liberty, which was uh, a very topical season. One of the best examples I have seen in television of the dangers of fascism for children, because ultimately what defines the soul of that season is what's going to happen to the child of Agent Liberty if he's going to follow in his father's footsteps. And there is an essay I have been planning for a while about TV shows addressing the topic of children exposed to fascism. We see it in The Boys, we see it in the Avatar cartoon, and I find it fascinating how fascism dresses up in a more friendlier image to try to appeal to children. And the way that that idea gets explored in the Supergirl show, even though keeping the hopeful and playful tone of the general show, it's not naive.
No, I agree. I mean, I thought it wasn't naive. I thought it was fairly sincere, and as I said, as I said, I think I watched all of the shows. I mean, it was actually kind of interesting. There was a point, I think, in the late 2010s where, like, I think the CW at least had a show. I think almost a DC show on every day, except maybe Friday and the weekend, and I think it held that for two years. And it might have kept on going, but I think one of the reasons, I mean, I think they took off a lot of their fantasy shows, and I don't know what they replaced them with. I don't know if they replaced them with standard action adventure shows, but uh, that one was the one I would look forward to. I mean, it was like you mentioned, it was it was challenging. It was challenging the status quo, and at the same time, I just felt, oh, this is going to be it was going to be interesting. It couldn't go into the darkness of the other shows, and it was dealing with other stuff. Anything about any more pre-movie Supergirl iterations?
I saw also the character in the 2000s Justice League animated series. I didn't, I don't remember seeing her in the Superman animated show, but to be honest, I didn't watch a lot of the Superman animated show. But on the Justice League series, She was always a very minor figure, and in the end, they dispatch her to the future where she's going to join the Legion of Superheroes
Mhm.
with a descendant of Brainiac, I think. Which is a funny moment because all this moment of sending Supergirl to the future happens when Superman is busy elsewhere, and then Supergirl explains that she's going to work alongside this Brainiac guy. And at the end of the episode, Superman shows up and asks what happened to Supergirl, and they says we send her to a superhero team in the future. Ah, okay. And Who's she going to work with? Fade to black. Because the joke is that as soon as Superman hears the name Brainiac, he's going to freak out.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the thing is, Brainiac 5 is a very well-established member of the Justice League, and also Supergirl and Superboy had ties to the Legion, and that I guess that's why they decided to do that. The interesting thing that you just reminded me while talking about, at that time, they had not reestablished in the comics that Supergirl was Kara Zor-El. They still used her as Kara, but technically she and Superman were not cousins. In fact, to explain her, Superman was exploring the wreckage of the Kryptonian solar system, and he discovered a colony planet or a moon or some small world in the system outside, and he found Kara in suspended animation and brought her to
Was
Earth.
that Daxam?
What?
Was that Daxam?
I might be. All I remember is it was a Kryptonian solar system, and there was an outer planet, and I he found Kara in a cryo chamber, and he brought her to Earth. So at that time, as I said, at that time, I mean that would have been in the Superman. That was definitely in the Superman animated series, and they were using a costume she was using. One of my favorite writers, Peter David, was writing him at the time, and the thing is, at the time, they weren't, for whatever reason, DC didn't want to bring Kara Zor-El back. They would do it later, years later. But at the time, he had to work with kind of the Matrix Supergirl, but he was allowed to change her. In fact, that change enabled him to like create his own spin-off character for a book he had the rights to. And when DC canceled the semi-sequel book called Fallen Angel, he was able to keep the rights and publish it somewhere else and publish more issues of it. But no, that I'm not sure. I can't confirm Daxon, but that was the idea of what they were trying to explain. They were trying to I guess they wanted to bring Supergirl in to the DC animated universe, and that was the way they did it in the 90s and the early 2000s.
Well, I also remember there's one of the animated movies outside of the Justice League animated show continuity. Uh, and it also focuses on Supergirl's adaptation to Earth. That movie ends with Supergirl moving to live with Wonder Woman in her island to train at the island. There was a scene that I loved in that movie where it is Batman who first examines the I think she's unconscious and frozen maybe. And Supergirl wakes up in the Batcave and begins destroying everything because she's terrified. And after everything is sorted out, Batman tells Superman, your cousin destroyed a lot of equipment. Superman says, well, send me the bill. And Batman says, on a reporter's salary. Right.
That is a classic. Now that interesting you bring that up. That was an adaptation of the official bringing back of Kara Zor-El into the mainstream continuity of DC. And it was a comic called Batman Superman. It was essentially a monthly Batman Superman team up book, similar to World's Finest, back in the 70s and 80s, maybe as far back as the 60s. So that was the way that they brought her back. And I love that. In fact, I love that story. The only thing I didn't like about it was at the end of the comic, they do this at the end of the show, but the thing is, at the end of the comic, practically everyone in the DC universe gets to be at essentially a debutante's presentation of Supergirl to the world. And in fact, one of the characters say, if and they do this on Paradise Island. I guess they had permission to bring the men on board to Paradise Island for her presentation. And what I thought was funny was one of the characters said, if they drop a bomb on us right now, Plastic Man's the most powerful hero on Earth because for whatever reason they said he wasn't there. But besides that, no, it followed that story quite. I guess they didn't have enough time to do crossovers. And what was interesting, I was when I bought the comic that I knew it was based on. I was the only thing that was kind of weird was it only lets you get into Batman and Superman's head, to hear their inner narration. I thought they would do that with Wonder Woman, but they didn't do that. I thought they would have also done that. But then she was a guest character. They thought that she would be the best one to trade Kara with her powers on Paradise Island. And and there was a little bit of a conflict because Superman wanted her, to be with him, it was his cousin. It was and that they brought back the fact she was a blood relative, so he wanted her closer to him. And then of course Darkseid gets mixed up into it. It's probably on HBO Max or wherever Max, but I think I don't know if I bought the DVD. I know I saw it somewhere, but then again, I think I bought uh those DVDs direct onto. Which leads us, I think, unless there's something more to say, I think which leads us to the current film, which is based on Woman of Tomorrow, which you pointed out in your review was based on a Hugo nominated work. In fact, I first read it because somebody put it on the spreadsheet, the great spreadsheet run by Renee, which somebody recommended it and somebody recommended it, and I checked it out. I forget it. I think I checked it out in my library digitally and I read it and I just couldn't put it down. I remember I was waiting for a friend to come out of work so we could have lunch, and I was just reading it. And it's a great book, and they took a lot of the major ideas uh, out in the basic plot structure. And so we now have Millie Alcock playing Supergirl, and I think she does a good job with it. Any initial thoughts you had before the film came out?
Before the film came out, I only had the brief scene of Supergirl at the end of the Superman movie last year, and I thought it was a very interesting idea that she had a personality so completely separate from Superman's. At the time, I was not aware of the comic, so I didn't know the full context of why she was a party girl. But once you take seriously the idea that she was older when she lost her Kryptonian family and she was old enough to see all the tragedy, it makes sense to write her as someone uh, who struggles with all that trauma and who doesn't have either the support she needs or the maturity she needs to deal with that trauma. And so far, the only solution she has found is to live perpetually drunk.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the things I liked about the film that she she is dealing with trauma, and that is one way of dealing with trauma. I mean, I was just listening to a review, and there are alternate ways of dealing with trauma. And there's no wrong way of doing it, and I think that was an interesting way. And I'm going to bring up one of the things I really liked about the movie was that the whole story of Argo City that they told in that film was literally from the Silver Age. That a little bit more well thought out. They didn't explain how a chunk of Krypton survived in the vacuum of space without on its own. They had to. I like how they explained that Zor-El came up with a force field to keep it in, but everything about a lot of people were starting to die because of the rate of the conversion of krypton, the planet parts of the planet, the planetary segment was turning into kryptonite and slowly killing the people. That was all straight from the Silver Age. I'm going, oh my God, they completely uh, did that. I think in the Batman v Superman, the idea was that she was supposed to be Superman. She was supposed to look after baby Kal-El, but due to problems along the lines of time dilation, she came later. She came later than expected, and that's how the origin was.
I am not very familiar with plots involving Argo City. But I do like storylines. Uh, like for example, when Superman keeps a miniaturized version of Candor. I don't know what Candor is the name, I think.
Candor, that's it, Candor.
I don't know whether Candor is also from Krypton or another planet. But I like that idea of a remnant of Krypton being preserved somewhere. Uh, and I wonder whether there is going to be any more exploration of what happened in the end to the people who were left on that city to live with the kryptonite. I would think uh, for reasons of practicality, they are probably not going to revisit Argo anymore. But it is even though the movie dispatches that topic relatively quickly, you have to keep in mind that the death of all those millions of people is persistently on Kara's mind. She saw her mother in agony slowly over uh, we don't know how many years from kryptonite poisoning, and multiply that by all the millions of people in Argo City, and you get an idea of the stakes of Kara's trauma, which which I think makes it very interesting that Kara doesn't seem to be able to confide in Clark to talk about her pain, because the Clark is obviously the only other Kryptonian around, but somehow Kara seems to connect more easily to her dog than to Clark. Clark being someone she could actually speak to. And I wish the movie had done a longer exploration of what it means, what it says about Kara as a character, what it says about her relationship to Clark, that she cannot confide in Clark to talk about these things, that she feels. Uh, Obviously, Clark didn't witness it, but it is also his tragedy. And the conversation at the end of the movie between Kara and Clark left me wanting more. Because after Kara has had all this adventure and has learned to be a heroine, she still must have questions for Clark. She still must have she still would want to know how Clark keeps doing it, how Clark keeps being a hero despite all the horrible things he has to deal with every day. Because even after having this adventure, I don't think Kara is immediately ready to start working as Supergirl on Earth.
I get that. I think I have a. I get it. I felt the film kind of explained it, at least to me, that and it's also something that came from the John Byrne era. John Byrne got to reboot Superman in the 80s. And the thing is, and that's one of the reasons that Kara had to leave, because many people, I think, in DC editorial and Byrne agreed that there were too many Kryptonian survivors, not just Kara, but also the Phantom Zone prisoners would show up every now and then, would escape and they'd cause havoc. You had Kandor City, and they felt that that was taking away Superman's uniqueness. And so that's why when they rebooted Superman in the 80s, they decided to, okay, he's the only one. He's on his own. And also, one of the things, one of the things they also did is he knows more about growing up in Kansas in America than he feels more American than Kryptonian. He's Americanized. And I felt the conversations that you saw when they first meet and other things that, he's the personification of American optimism of what we want to be in ourselves. And I think she goes, "Oh, I don't know if he can." And and this is how I see it, that he can't deal with what he doesn't get what I'm dealing with. He's been growing up here, relatively safe, relatively stable, and I grew up in the situation you just described. So I thought that was the thing, and I thought you might be right. I thought it was enough for me. And your mileage may vary. That the last conversation, it's like, okay, the gap between them is a little bit smaller than it was at the beginning of the film. But again, your mileage may vary on that. What do you think about the plot itself? I mean, it does take loosely Woman of Tomorrow, and but taking out the crucial, I think the crucial elements that she teams up with this young woman named Ruthie. What are your thoughts about the whole Ruthie, team up together?
It's a classic formula. It works. It works so well that it has been remade a number of times. Mm, it made me think of the 90s movie, uh, which one was it? Batman Forever, where uh, Robin loses his parents. He starts living with Bruce, and he wants Bruce to help him avenge his parents. And Bruce tries to teach Robin the rule of not killing. And in the end, the villain does die, and Robin does get some catharsis about the death of his parents. That was the closest analog I could think of because I haven't seen any of the True Grit movies. I didn't know about the story. Uh, I think it strikes you as very odd that I make this connection with Batman Forever.
No, no, no. I mean, no, I mean that is I think that is the classic Batman Robin, at least in the modern age, that he finds a child in the same situation and tries to not make him less damaged than he is. In fact, they made a joke that there was a reference to that in the Young Justice TV show that no, I want him not to be like me. I want him to, I helped him, deal with his angst in a better way than I can deal with mine. And so, no, there's nothing. That part of Batman Forever kind of makes sense. There's other problems with the film that's another conversation. But I mean, I do kind of like that whole. I did like that storyline that she's trying to help somebody out when I was reading the original comic. What I something I don't think you mentioned in your review, and maybe I missed it, and I apologize if I did. They brought in people kept talking about sex trafficking. What I thought they brought in was essentially Fury Road with the brides. That's what popped into my mind when I was seeing the film. Do you think that was a good idea or a bad idea to bring that in? Because I know that was from outside the comic.
I think it was lazy.
Fair enough.
It's part of the same tendency that when you have a female superhero, you give her a female problem to solve. And all right, we all know sex trafficking is horrendous, and it is a thing, uh, a suitable motivation for a hero to solve. But in reviews of the movie written by women, I have found that they complain that the sex trafficking victims are passive characters in the movie. The 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 sex trafficking victims in the movie are there to be saved. They are there to wait for someone to save them instead of they themselves taking the initiative to try to do something for themselves, which is something that I noticed no male reviewer had pointed out. It was something that only female reviewers commented on.
All right. That's it. Although I guess I'm willing to give them a break because I thought at the end, I guess they have to get freed at the end, so that goes to that point. But at the end, you see them manning weapons, and once they get an opportunity, they take it. But it is right; they need that initial rescue to get it done. So no, that's an interesting point. And I guess my analogy of comparing it to Fury Road was in Fury Road, Furiosa was always working in conjunction with these women to make their own escape and to take care of their own futures, and they didn't need Mad Max to save them. He was just there along for a ride to a certain extent and to assist them. So no, that's a very good point. Um, well, and also let's bring up. I think this was. I know. I guess this what I if I recall correctly, this one. What do you think about the inclusion of Lobo in the film? I don't think you were fond of it. Me, I thought it was okay. I mean, this is his first presentation, I think, in live action, either in a long time or maybe even the first time. I could be wrong about that, but I thought if you're gonna, I think I think it was a good way to include him, but I could see also why it could be distracting. Uh, please let us know what your take on it was.
I have to confess, I have never liked the character. I find Lobo to be immensely uninteresting. I met him for the first time in the Superman animated show, and that whole episode was very boring because the character gets annoying really quickly. I I have honestly never seen the point of that character. He's almost a parody of himself, and the parody is not even funny. And the thing about hiring Jason Momoa for this role is that you eventually get the same thing that Jason Momoa always does. It is Jason Momoa playing the role of Jason Momoa. And he adds absolutely nothing to the story. Uh, a- at some point, I was afraid that he was in the movie just to conveniently kill the people that the heroes were not going to kill. I don't know, the best explanation I have seen was someone commented that the producers must have been scared of releasing a movie about girls, so they added a macho so they could sell the movie to macho viewers. And thinking about that hypothesis, it sort of makes sense. He has no reason of his own to be in the plot. He's just glued in. You could basically remove him from the movie and nothing happens. Nothing changes. He's he's almost like a vanity project for Jason Momoa.
No, I think you could say that. I haven't seen Jason. I'm trying to remember. Aside from Aquaman, I I'm an outlier. I'm not big into Game of Thrones, and also I didn't have HBO at the time, so I couldn't watch it. So I don't know. That was sort of what he was. That was he did Game of Thrones before he did Aquaman. Am I correct about that? Or
Yes,
yeah.
and
So
he
I'm not familiar with him. Uh, I I'm very I'm saying this honestly. I've always been cool towards Lobo. I'm not a big fan. I just know, oh, he's this guy, and I kind of got the idea. Yeah, he's kind of obnoxious, and I don't. I'm agnostic. I'm indifferent towards him. You know, if he shows up in a comic I'm reading, when I follow comics, it's usually I'm following the writer, and if the writer wants to have him, I think Peter David might have had him as a guest in both Aquaman and Supergirl, which were the two big DC books he was working on in the 90s, and maybe Young Justice, I'm not sure because I didn't that snuck up on me and I didn't follow it as closely. So, uh indifferent, although yeah, I it didn't bother me, but you know, you do have a point. You can take him out and it doesn't change the plot anyway. It doesn't change the plot anyway, but maybe they were just trying to test him out for maybe future Lobo project. Is I think he was one of those popular characters in the 90s. I mean, he was kind of like maybe I think I heard somewhere and I can't remember who said that he was uh DC's equivalent to Deadpool, although I may have the years wrong about that. So that's why, you know, they want to put him in. In fact, I did listen. Oh, that might have been into the best movies never made because they actually tried to do a Lobo solo film, uh, but it
did
never
they
got
have an
off the
actor in
ground.
mind?
What?
Did they have an actor in mind?
I don't know. I forgot if they had an actor in mind. You could, and I'm sorry, I can't remember if they did. I mean, if you're interested, the show is called The Best Movies Never Made, and it was their last episode. Uh, and they're the whole thing. Oh, I don't know. One of the guys who makes that show, I don't know if you ever saw the documentary on. Uh, oh God, I'm blanking out on uh, this famous director's Dune. The failed Dune project that came in before David Lynch's Dune. It was by a big Jodorowsky's Jodorowsky's Dune. He did that, and what they do is they look at film projects which never came to fruition. So I mean, the idea of doing it. So this might be a backdoor to see if there's any chance of maybe doing a Lobo solo film. So people seem to like the character. I agree. I don't get it. I mean, if they do a film, I'll probably see it just because it's a comic book movie, and I'll always be there. Uh, Although not necessarily. I did the. I'll be honest, and this is not a criticism against you or anybody who likes. When people explained to me The Boys, it was at a time I said, I need to have more optimism in my life, and The Boys is not a show which sounds like it's an optimistic show, and I couldn't. That's why I decided to pass on it. And I heard it's done good things, and I'm glad for that. But that's the only reason why I passed on it.
I feel The Boys does have a core of optimism.
Okay.
Uh, because the actual heroes who are fighting against the superheroes have all the odds against them, and still they don't give up.
All right.
If they didn't feel that there was something worth fighting for, that there was uh, a conceivable world that they could achieve, they would not have spent 5 entire seasons fighting the superhero industrial complex.
Yeah.
And
Now,
the ending is so cathartic. I mean,
really?
in the ending, you have the evil Superman on his knees, begging to be spared, offering to eat poop on TV if that will get him spared. And he's
Interesting.
doing that in the Oval Office.
Yeah, maybe I'll have to reconsider. Now, one thing, there's only one thing I'd have to question in your review. You felt that the production values are not as good because you didn't think the planets were as interesting. I don't know. I was blown away. I mean, I think the last planet they were on, the one with the twin suns, that was filmed in Iceland, and that had an exotic look. But I can also understand what you're saying because it's not going to look as good as that original comic, which had these beautiful vistas, incredible, fantastic vistas. But I thought they did as best as they could deliver. But that's my opinion.
Well, the thing about filming in a natural location is that you're going to get natural beauty. And this is supposed to be a movie in space, and when you visit a location in space, you're expecting something that does not exist on Earth. So
That's a
you
good.
expect a much more striking sky, a much more striking diversity of vegetation or creatures or something. In all the natural landscapes in the movie, I don't think we see any wild animal, for example.
Oh wait, well, no, not a wild animal. I think in the first one there was a domesticated animal, so that doesn't count. No, I get what you're saying, and you know what? I just realized my bar might be low. If you show something to me that doesn't look like Canada, which unfortunately a lot of science fiction shows are filmed in, I'm impressed. I mean, I think I remember, a lot of Star Trek, uh, a lot of 21st century Star Trek, like Discovery and Strange New Worlds might have taken out and gone somewhere like Iceland. I think I remember there was because they just weren't filming in the same Vancouver forest or whatever generic thing it is. So it's like, ooh, I'm impressed. And maybe you've got the right idea that you're asking for a higher bar, for your alien landscapes. And so anything, it might be easier to impress me.
What do you think about the urban locations?
The interesting thing I noticed, and I don't know, I wonder. The only thing is, they always did it at night, and I'm wondering if that what are they trying to hide something? Is it an effect reason? Because um, I felt yeah, I think all of the urban shots were usually at night.
Hmm.
So aside from that, I mean, it looked okay. I mean, it looked future, it looked futuristic to me. Again, that anything that goes outside. Outside, I
I think
mean,
science fiction needs to outgrow the Blade Runner aesthetic.
you might be right, but the thing is, I'll be honest, and we might have to agree to disagree. I love the Blade Runner aesthetic. And maybe, and I'll admit to it, and you have the right to criticize. I just kind of liked it. I mean, I think that was one of the reasons I liked. I don't know if you saw it. They did a Blade Runner animated series, and of course they duplicated the aesthetic, and of course in 24.99. It's I guess if you want to go dark, that's the aesthetic you go for.
Yeah, the thing is, now you see it everywhere, and now all the movies that replicate that aesthetic feel interchangeable.
No, you got a point.
And for example, there is this planet they visit, and they go to a bar, and you have the classic scenario of a bar scene in space, and they are singing a human song. Why would they do that? Why wouldn't they take the chance to show us galactic music?
Wait, okay. I might be misremembering. I thought it just had a. I just thought that might have. I thought that was the background music. I didn't think that was the music coming in from the bar. But
There was a singer in the bar.
oh, okay. Oh, yeah, you're right.
She's singing Girl from Ipanema.
You're right. Yeah, that is. Yeah, that is nutty. I mean, you should. You're talking to one. You're talking to probably one of. Yeah, you're talking to somebody who in Return of the Jedi they made an effort into writing a pop song, an original pop song for Size Noodles. So yeah, oh no, that was a good point. I forgot about that. I only seen the film a week ago. Anything else that you want to talk about the film?
The look of the film is a disappointment. I usually avoid drawing too strict a comparison between an adaptation and the source material because the movie has to be able to stand on its own. But there's the problem that on its own, the movie looks ugly. It looks dusty, it looks dirty, grayish, brownish, dark yellow. And it's like they forgot other colors exist. And that on its own, it's boring. It's unpleasant to watch, and it gets really confusing in the final fight because the final fight is inside a dust storm, and you don't get a sense of how far things are or how many people are in the fight. It all looks blurry and hazy and generally ugly. That on its own is a problem, but multiply that by 100 when you consider it is an adaptation of a gorgeous comic that has explosions of color. And I was left wondering if you're not going to show us those colors, why are you adapting this comic in the first place? Why did you choose this comic to adapt if you're not going to honor the art style? That is one of the reasons why people love that comic in the first place.
Maybe they thought that was a safe plot, but then maybe they couldn't afford. Well, I can't say that they did spend a lot of money for this movie. It's over. It's almost close to mid.
Maybe in the music.
Yeah, well, 100,000. Well, it isn't in the actors. Now somebody posted on Facebook that they said that Millie Alcock only got 450,000, and supposedly Mr. Cornsweet only got 750,000. And I was kind of surprised. I thought if you're doing a big tentpole film, you'd at least get a
Why
million.
would they pay Superman more?
Well, unfortunately, you got a point there. But there was somebody arguing against that. I was just kind of surprised it's so low for both of them. I mean, because these
I
are
have
being
to
promoted
ask.
as big tentpole films.
I have to ask how much Jason Momoa charges for being in 2 minutes in this movie.
No, that's also true. And also, they have gone a lot to promote the film. I mean, there were a lot of ads for it. I saw, and I thought the trailer. I mean, the trailer made me kind of generally interested in seeing it. Yeah, you do have a point of why didn't they use the color scheme of the comic, but at the same time, they just might have just wanted to focus on the story. That's why they decided to adapt the story. Oh, and that is one thing I want to say. They did tell people, hey, don't worry, there's not a post-credit sequence. You can leave as soon as the movie's over. There is one reason I would say to stay at the end of the movie, because that's where they give all the creators credit. In Marvel, I know where to find the creators credit. It's usually when they start showing everybody who works at Marvel, and that's where you'll find they'll give the creator. If it's not a big name creator, they'll give the creator credit for the main character, and then they'll talk about all the writers and artists who have worked on that character throughout the years. Literally, the last credit in this film was all the people in the comics. The original creator, Supergirl, Al Plastino, and Otto Bender, and then all the other writers who supported it. They also had they didn't credit Lobo separately, but I think if I recall correctly, Lobo was created by Keith Griffin, and he was credited at the end of it. So yeah, please check out the end so you can at least see the creator's credits for it. That's the only part of it that I would say. Yeah, I am kind of surprised I didn't do if anything, to lead off to the next film, but then the next film is Clayface, unless there's something television in the works.
There's the Green Lantern show.
Do you think? Do you think it would have helped if they had a cameo of a Green Lantern just flying by, or just hanging out in space, or just seeing him in the background? Kevin Smith
They
just
sh
said that yesterday.
they should have replaced Lobo with a lantern.
Ooh,
If you have an interstellar band of people traffickers, that would be a thing that a lantern would be interested in investigating.
no, that's a good choice.
Even if you don't want to involve the Green Lantern Corps too soon, even a random blue lantern passing by would have been appropriate.
I guess maybe DC still has hope for that Lobo movie.
But what kind of stories? I know Lobo has had his own series and has appeared for decades, but there is a limited range of the stories where you can put Lobo.
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, there were at least two. I think they talked about two scripts that they tried to get produced either in the late 90s or early 2000s. Any final thoughts?
Well, there has been a lot of unpleasant discussion online about this movie, as is habitual every time there is a woman-led movie. And I am torn between two thoughts, which is it is always a missed opportunity when they have a project as big as this to showcase a character as important as this, and it turns out to be mediocre. But at the same time, and this is something I saw women commenters say, uh, we should hope for an industry where, just like male heroes are allowed to have great movies and mediocre movies, women heroes should also be allowed to have great movies and mediocre movies.
No, that's a good point. I mean, one of the things that I did know, Mark Bernardin says that this is a fine movie. I mean, he thought it was, he thought it was an okay movie, and I think the problem is, are women allowed to have an okay movie, or are movies that are over $100 million allowed to be only okay? Is the question. And
Well, the problem with this particular movie is that it is aggressively okay.
I would encourage my friends to see it. They're friends who don't usually see things on first release, and I do, but I would tell them to check this out. And I'm always for the big screen experience, and I think it does. I think it does. I think this does warrant seeing it on the big screen. I hope it does well, and I hope maybe it finds its audience, and hopefully it doesn't discourage any future projects like that. Any future projects involving women or other marginalized characters.
I keep crossing my fingers to have one day a Vixen movie, and maybe a dozen Vixen movies and a dozen Vixen TV shows. I would not complain.
Did you see her on Legends of Tomorrow?
I saw specifically the scenes where Vixen was there.
Right,
I
that's what I
care
meant.
for literally nothing else in that show.
Okay, fair enough. I have a friend and I know a bunch of people who are following the show for another podcast. They actually liked it better when it, not that when she left, but when they got a little bit more fun, when they got a little bit more funnier.
Another missed opportunity is the point of view. In the comic, you get the story narrated by Ruthie, and the focus is this sort of distanced perspective of how crossing paths with Supergirl changes ordinary people. Whereas in the movie, it is Kara's story. And you lose that narrative device that is very interesting in the comic.
That also might have scared them. Now that you bring that up, I don't know. That might have scared the fact that we weren't doing it from her point of view. Although it worked in the comic, and I would have followed it. I would have liked to have seen them try that in the film.
I just remembered that very recently, season 2 of the animated show My Adventures with Superman also introduced a version of Supergirl. This one is brainwashed by Brainiac into conquering planets. That is quite an interesting interpretation of the character.
Actually, the third season has just come out in the States, and I've been watching it, and she's also Kara is still an important part of that. I like that show's been doing some really interesting things. I'm following that show. on another podcast called Toonami, because they're showing it during the Toonami cartoon block on Cartoon Network / Adult
Toonami still
Swim.
exists.
What?
Toonami still exists.
Oh yes, don't tell. You're like my cynical anime friends who tell me that Yeah, I don't know. Toonami still exists. It's still playing on Saturday nights. My roommate, who's an anime fan, feels I base my anime watching too much on Toonami, and I should get out and see other shows. But yeah, no, it still exists as a block from 12 o'clock to 3. I don't know how to. I know it does have some outreach in the rest of the world. So, and they're right now opening up Toonami with the premieres of the My Adventures of Superman.
I'm looking forward to a sort of spin-off they're planning, which is My Adventures with Green Lantern.
Yep, that's in the work, and they actually might have done a quick preview. A character. I don't want to spoil it for you since you haven't seen the 3rd season, but there's a character that makes a cameo and a scene with Supergirl in it. So, check that out. But any more thoughts on Supergirl?
Can't think of anything else.
I liked it a little bit more than most people. I hope it does get a good shot. I hope it does. I doubt, I heard over from other sources it's probably not going to, they're not going to fire James Gunn over it. But at the same time, I hope it does get a good shake and, a lot more people see it. I think it's a fun action adventure movie. Parts of it work, and I think the parts of it that work are worth watching. So that's all for us on Supergirl.
You've been listening to Marku 42. Your hosts, Mark Baumgarten, Vicky Jakubowski, and Juan Sanmiguel. If you'd like to leave a comment for us, please email us at marku42.42@gmail.com. Marku 42's universe is produced and directed by Mark Baumgarten. Copyright 2026.